All right, welcome everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I want to go through just a couple things before we get started with the session. My name's Alan Haupt. I'm with CA Technologies. I want to thank you for coming. First of all, for the Q&A session, you have access, hopefully, to the mobile app, the CA World mobile app. If you do, I'm going to tell you how to ask questions during the session, and we'll be monitoring them, and we'll answer them at the end. If we can't get to them, we'll respond to you through the app. First, you would go into interactive sessions, pick session, and then click on participate and Q&A. Okay, so that's interactive sessions, session, participate, Q&A. And you can enter questions throughout the session there, and we'll reply to them. If we don't have time, we'll be to the side here at the end of the session, and you can come up and we'll answer your questions. So, on to the session today, the ITSM experience of a lifetime. We have some speakers here today from Spectrum Health. We have Matt Hantle, who's a service management architect, and we have Tammy Rhoades, who's manager of service management. I think you heard a lot today about the business consumer, the end consumers, and how they're important in terms of driving towards the, reacting to the application economy, and they're going to be talking about how they can bring the user experience of a lifetime to your organizations much quicker than you would think. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Alan. All right, well, on behalf of CA and Spectrum Health, welcome to the ITSM experience of a lifetime. I should note that this experience of a lifetime was really the experience of a lifetime that we had, and we're going to tell you about that. I'm hoping to level set expectations and make sure that everyone is not expecting an experience of a lifetime with our presentation. So anyway, I'm Matt Hantle, and Tammy Rhoades is with me as well. We are going to tell you about how we use lean process improvement and the Scrum Agile methodology to deliver and deploy a service catalog to 30,000 users. That includes over 40,000 services, and people actually like it. So we're going to kind of go into how we did that and some of the. Well, first of all, we'll talk about who we are. We'll talk about lean, and we'll introduce you to some of the lean process improvement concepts. We'll talk about one of our favorite questions, which is what is the problem you're trying to solve? We will tie lean process improvement into the Scrum development methodology, and then we'll reserve the balance of the time for questions. So Spectrum Health, who are we? Well, we are a fully integrated healthcare system in Western Michigan. We're actually the largest healthcare system in Western Michigan. We have 11 hospitals, 170 service sites. Our medical group has over 1,000 providers, and our Priority Health, which is our insurance group, has over 500,000 members. We have, from a service management standpoint, a couple of the numbers that we pay close attention to is we have over 21,000 employees, and as I mentioned, we have upwards of 30,000 people that use our technology and our software and our systems and our new service catalog. So it's quite a huge undertaking trying to get the right services to the right people in that group. And we've been named to a number of national top 10 lists, top 15 lists, and most recently we were named a top 15 health system across the nation. So the question that we, as we were developing our service catalog, we also developed a habit of asking this question, and the question is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And for us, we learned to focus on the actual problem that the user had, not necessarily the problem they thought they had, or the problem we thought they had, or the solution that they thought they needed to solve the problem that they thought they had, but the actual problem, because until you actually understand a problem, you can't come up with a solution. So initially with Service Catalog, we thought we had a user problem. And before we had Service Catalog, we had something called the Security Access Request Form, or the SAR, as it was affectionately known throughout the organization. The SAR consisted of a web page with a series of checkboxes and free text fields whereby end users and managers could order technology, access, and applications for any of their employees. And so the challenge that our end users face with this thing is that it is 27 pages long, all printed out, and our users, we actually did a survey a couple years ago, and we asked our end user community, what's the biggest pain point you have, or what are the biggest pain points that you have with the IT department? And what came back at the very top of the list, and it wasn't even close, was this thing, this security access request form. And they said, and everyone let us know loud and clear that anything you can do to improve this will greatly improve your relationship with the business. And so we set about to do just that. And initially, before we tackled that, we initially thought, well, the challenge that we have is really a user problem. As long as we teach our end users how to properly fill out this form and how to properly check the right boxes and fill out the right fields, then the problem's going to go away. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. We didn't really have a user problem. We also thought, well, okay, so we must have a technology problem. This thing is antiquated. It doesn't really meet the needs. But you know what? We bought this cool thing called CA Service Catalog. And I think this thing can solve our problem. And so our VP directed us to replace the SAR form and this system with Service Catalog. He said, I just want everything that's in there into the Service Catalog, and that should help move us along. And so we did that. We went ahead and built what we called our Service Catalog version 1.0. And when we were done with that, we took it to the VP and we took it to the end user community. And the feedback wasn't all that positive because this actually turned out to be 28 pages long. And it looks very similar to what was going on in the security access request form. It's just a giant list of things that you can order. And it wasn't until we actually sat down with our end users and watched them fill some of these things out that it began to dawn on us that the challenge really isn't in the fact that we have a big list. It's in that this big list doesn't make sense to our end users. And the feedback that we got was, look, there are 3 or 4 things on this list that I understand. The rest is foreign to me. Can you do something to just show me and provide me with the 2 or 3 things that I care about? So we set about to solve that challenge. And we came up with what I'll call our Service Catalog version 1.5, which about the same time CA introduced this concept of form tables and allowed us to use a dynamic, thank you, sir. Allowed us to use a dynamic query to actually generate lists of things. And so we started data mining through our IT systems to find lists of things that people had in common based on their job title and the department in which they worked. And so we used all this data, we cross-referenced it, we provided it in a table. And we sat down with the VP and all of his directors, and all the directors were like, wow, this is great. This is so much better than where we were. And our VP, all the directors left the room, and the VP was still sitting there. And I said, well, what do you think? What do you think about this, Scott? And he actually said, it's a little bit coarse, but he said, well, I really like what you've done with the data. I said, but he said, the interface sucks. It just sucks. And we were a little bit taken aback by that, but after a little while, we realized that he wasn't wrong. Giving somebody a big table of data that looks like maybe an Excel spreadsheet on steroids and asking them to order based on that wasn't good enough. It wasn't fitting the bill. And when we went and sat with users and watched them fill these things out or attempt to fill them out, the feedback that came back was, why can't you provide me with a description? Why can't you show me a little picture that relates to something I've already got so I know what I'm ordering? Great idea. So at that point, as we got into lean process improvement, we realized we had a process problem. And when we started watching our users interact with these systems, whether it was the SAR or the first version or the second version of the catalog, did we actually start moving in the right direction to really put together a solution that's going to work for everybody. And so, as a brief introduction to Lean, this guy is Taishi Ono, and he is regarded as the father of the Toyota production system. And outside of Toyota, it's called Lean Process Improvement. He pioneered concepts of Genchi Genbutsu, which is to go and see. If you want to solve a problem, if you want to make a process better, you need to go see that problem, or you need to see that process in action. And where do you go? You go to Gemba. Gemba is the place where the real work is done. Now, oftentimes we tend to think that the real work is done in IS, and that is true to an extent, but when we're talking about, and for us with Service Catalog, we're really talking about where our end users use those systems that we are providing to them. And we learned that it was invaluable to sit and watch users interact with our systems, to take notes, and to not interfere. You know, it's kind of like Star Trek with the prime directive. You know, you don't get involved, you just observe. Take lots of notes, and then the other concept that's really also very critical is Hansei. You always want to reserve some time after you've watched your end users to reflect on what you've seen and resolve to make improvements. And so another big concept in Lean is when you see waste in a process, and this is what Toyota does better than anybody, when you spot waste, you look to eliminate it. Unless it absolutely has to be there, if there are wasteful steps in your process, get rid of them. And so we applied this principle to our Windows XP to Windows 7 migration. We very quickly had to migrate 20,000 devices from Windows XP to Windows 7. And at the same time, we were rolling out CA's IT client automation in the Windows 7 environment, and we were replacing a legacy software deployment system. So we had to come up with a way to move all these computers from one system to the other and from one software deployment system to the other. And so we wrote a service catalog service to do just that. We made use of the tables that I mentioned before to basically produce lists of software that was needed based on what we found on the old systems. And the challenge that we ran into in doing that and moving all these devices, very early on, the technicians that were interacting with the catalog service that we provided started complaining about how much time it was taking. And I said, oh, this thing's too slow, It's taking 20 or 30 or 40 minutes just to set up and do the software deployment piece in IT client automation. And we thought, well, that's not so bad. I mean, it's doing a lot of work. But it was when we actually sat down, we went to Gemba, we sat down and watched the real work going on, that we realized that this was killing the technicians and this was killing the project because we had 20,000 of these things to do, and any amount of waste in that process was going to kill us. So we sat down and using the Lean process improvement techniques, we're able to work to eliminate wasteful steps. And we found a number of wasteful steps. Actually, in our PAM, or process automation, we found a number of steps that we could reorganize and make more efficient. And the net result was that we were able to take an average install time of 25 minutes down to 1.5 minutes for every one of these devices. Now, we had already upgraded about 2,000 of the devices at that point, so we had 18,000 left, and the savings from making that change resulted in over 7,000 hours of productivity saved, so that someone actually has had their computer and was working on their computer instead of it being with a technician. And so along this theme of what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and to tie in Lean process improvement to the Scrum development methodology, I'll let Tammy take over.
So, as Matt said, we made several runs at getting Service Catalog out to the entire organization. At this point, we had a working catalog in a pilot in our surgical services area, and we had a couple different versions of catalog, 1.0 and 1.5 in IT and in Zealand, one of our community hospitals. And so we had to stop part of our catalog journey to do the Windows XP to Windows 7 upgrade because of the stop dead date on that, and I don't know how many others that happened to. Higher priorities came up. And so we were ready to make another run at Service Catalog, and we started looking at the problem again and saying, what is the problem that we've had in the past? We know what the problem is to solve, but in order to solve that, we have to do it quickly. Because if we didn't do it quickly, we're likely to have another high priority come in and stop us again. So, and doing the same thing that we've been doing was the definition of insanity, because we couldn't continue to use the same methodologies that we had been deploying and expect that we'd get different results. So we went to Scrum and started researching what we could do with Scrum. In our more development-centered part of Spectrum Health, they were already using Scrum. And so it was a technology that we could use to say we could deploy our service catalog using it more rapidly. And Scrum is just an interactive, incremental process for getting work done. So we did some research on it and got going on it. The name for Scrum comes from rugby. It's the whole idea of the whole team working on a scrum to get the ball down the field and to pass the goal line. And so it's very aptly named about this whole interactive, co-located team that is really self-motivating, self-assigning. So this diagram goes along what the Scrum process looks like. You start with a Scrum product backlog, which is all the different features and things you need to do for your particular your product. You go into a sprint planning meeting. That sprint planning meeting, you decide what you're going to do for the next sprint cycle. A sprint cycle is time of work. And then you start going into your sprint cycle, which is 2 weeks. We use 2-week periods of time for our sprint cycle. We met every day for a daily scrum. And then at the end, we had a deliverable product of those pieces, those features that we had worked on during that sprint cycle. And we had a review meeting with our stakeholders and had a retrospective with the team. So for our implementation, we created our backlog. What were the features? What were the pieces, parts? What were the services that other parts of Spectrum Health needed that our surgical services department didn't need? So we still have to build them. Still have to use something like that. What needs to get done? We upgraded PAM. We upgraded service catalog during this process. So that was all things that we said we want to be, when we deploy this to 20,000 plus, we want to make sure that we're on the latest and greatest releases. We prioritized and sized our stories. So we looked at priority from a customer point of view. How many customers were using would use that particular service, that particular feature? Was it a part of our electronic medical record, which meant a lot of people and it was very important to us for healthcare? Or was it a part of Snagit, where the likelihood is, the value was less to the organization? Because we had over 1,200 applications that we were looking at having to be able to have access and deploy on this. And then we looked at each of these stories and started sizing them on using a T-shirt model. Is it extra small, or is it medium, or is it extra large? And the size on that, we started our first one and said, for a 2-week sprint cycle, what's a medium story look like? So we determined what that medium story looks like, and as soon as we had the medium story defined, then we sized everything else accordingly. This one is smaller than the medium, it's a small, or an extra small. This one's a lot bigger, maybe it's an extra large. And we found that our sizing was pretty much dead on. Part of Scrum also talks about having this dedicated team. And I don't know about anybody else, but we run production and we have to do development. So the whole thought of us having a dedicated team was not something that we could do. We still had to support our production environment. So we created our version of a dedicated team. We emailed our stakeholders to say, we're trying to do this, and here's the reason why. We're trying to get this to market faster, because it's our number one problem for the company, and so we want to get it to market faster. And in that, we could look at having office hours. And so we asked all of our stakeholders to say, here's the development team. We don't only want you to disturb the development team for non-critical production questions during these hours. The rest of the time is development time. We created signs that they could display at their desk that basically said, I'm in a sprint cycle now, please go away. Or, I'm open for questions now. ask whatever you want to ask. And I policed it a little bit at the beginning. I was the mama bear at the beginning to police it, but it worked surprisingly well. And we also gave the development team the ability to ignore email and IMs when they were on their development cycle. So really focusing on, the power of focus is so great. So in our doing part of the Scrum cycles, we use visual management. You can see it's very high tech. This is the side of a metal file cabinet. We had a ready, doing, and done, each of them on the side of a file cabinet. And so this is our very first sprint. We had the thought process to actually take a picture. I was surprised when I found it. And we started with 3 stories in our first sprint cycle, which are on the white cards. And then the yellow Post-its, another high-tech thing, are the tasks that needed to be done to make those stories happen. And so the team would basically grab a Post-it when they were ready to work on it, put it over to the doing file cabinet, and so that everybody knew what they were doing. And when they were done, they moved it to the done file cabinet, and then I knew to look at it to say, do I agree it was done? Was the documentation done? What, were all the things that I considered done part of the done? And part of that was the daily Scrum, no more than 15 minutes. So if you say, how can you meet every day? No more than 15 minutes. And each team member, I had the whole team member, not only just the development team. What did I do yesterday? What do I plan on doing today? And what are my roadblocks? And it's surprising the amount of power that gives you, because even the people who said my roadblocks are, I'm working on this and I'm not quite sure what to do, somebody else on the team could say, this is what you need to do. I can help you. And it really brought up the ability to ask that question and be empowered right away. Our check cycle. We had sprint reviews with stakeholders every 2 weeks. We invited everybody that was involved with whatever story we were working on. So we scheduled a big conference room. If they came, great. If they didn't, they didn't. We had a sprint retrospective with the team, where we talked about what went well with the previous sprint, what didn't go well, what could we improve on, and what experiments we wanted to try for the next time. So along the way, we were continually improving how we were using the process. And then several times we went back to where the real work was done, and we took the product, we took catalog, and sat it down in front of an practice office manager, and said, we'd like you to order something. And then we sat back and watched and observed, just like Matt said. We didn't say anything. We sat back, we observed, we took notes, and we asked them to think out loud while they were doing that, so that we could really see what their thought process was and what confused them. And as a result of that, we made changes. The things that confused them, we changed those things. And we also got stories, new features, what they said, you know what, this is really nice, but if it only did this, it would be so much better. And you can't imagine the power of taking that back to that person you had the Gemba with and saying, you know what, this was your idea, and showing that and the power that gives you. So coming it all together, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the right thing was to do, what was the right problem. We then worked on making sure we were doing it right by going to Gemba, doing a plan, do, check, act cycle, which is also part of Scrum, and doing our sprint reviews, making sure that the stakeholders and that the process was really transparent. I mean, the whole thing with Scrum is that you really are trying to make the whole process very transparent to all your customers and make them a part of this process. And then doing it fast. Iterations and the focus that the sprints brought us really made us able to take the product to market faster than we would have been able to using a typical waterfall methodology, and before some other priority came up, which has come up, but luckily we've already deployed. So this is kind of a before and after. The before, you had to tell us who you were, even though we knew who you were, and you had all the things you had to check box. Now we tell you, we know who you are. There you are. Who's going to approve? Who's going to approve your request, so you know what the approval process is. You can see, in this case, the first button, which is not highlighted in orange, would have been their current services. The second, suggested services. People like you have these applications. They have the same title that you have, or they are in the same department that you have. So this is kind of the end result. Yes. I don't know if there's more you want to say on this.
Let me grab my clicker here.
Slide?
Yeah.
No? Go? Okay.
Yeah, we'll try to get a question or two
Yep.
in it. Yeah. The results. Once we deployed this thing to the organization, of course, there was a lot of flurry of activity and a lot of feedback. Some of it was, a lot of questions and people, using a new system. But we got, surprisingly, a number of unsolicited emails that where people were actually overjoyed in using this new system that we had given them. And one lady had sent an email to one of the VPs saying, I don't know who put this together, but I just wanted to tell you that it was so great. I want to go do another order just to use the system again. So we had a lot of positive feedback, and then another tangible thing that happened is in the very first week we saw a 48% reduction in the number of tickets that were going to our identity and access management team. Things that they were manually processing before were now completely automated, and that's made a huge difference for that team and for all of our end users that were waiting for the manual processes to take place. And then finally, the VP that I mentioned before that said that, oh, that sucks, it just really sucks. It got to the point where we were going to roll this catalog out and we had a fixed date. And we said, Scott, it's coming. We're going to retire the SAR, and it's going away. And he's like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. He was kind of prodding us along. So when we finally did turn catalog on for everybody, and we're finally able to turn off and kill that SAR system, we gave him a condolences card, which included a security access request to terminate the security access request system, and a do not resuscitate order, because we're in healthcare, and we like that kind of joke. So anyway, we had a little fun. And with that, Alan, questions?
Yeah, thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed that. We do have time for just a couple questions. I got a couple here that came in on the mobile app, so thank you. And there's one really good one here that I want to ask, and then we'll open it up to the floor, and the speakers will be off to the side here if we don't have time to get to your questions, so please come up and talk with us. The question that I think is very appropriate here is, what would have been the results if you didn't use Lean? Would things have been delayed? Would the users have been less satisfied? Anything else?
We didn't use what?
If you hadn't used Lean, what would be the results? The same?
What the results would have been, and we know because we kept making the same kind of mistakes over and over again. There's a tendency within IT, and probably not your IT shop, but at least ours, where we think we know everything, right? And we have maybe people embedded that used to work in the business and now they work in IT, and they think they know everything that's going on in the business because, and we have this with healthcare where somebody might have been a nurse and now they're in IT and they think, oh, I know everything about everything that's going on in the hospital because I used to be a nurse. Truth is, we don't know until we actually go out and we sit and we watch people interact with these systems that we've given them. And that was the biggest lesson for us. So we probably would not have gotten very far if it hadn't been for that lesson of lean process improvement, which is that first step in going to Gemba.
And I truly believe that if we hadn't used Scrum, it wouldn't be implemented right now, because with the waterfall method, we would still be trying to do everything. And it was the elephant, and by using Scrum, we could decide what pieces were the most important. We have stories right now that will be in the next revision or the third revision of this version of the catalog, because we deemed that they weren't necessary for the base. The whole thing, the mantra was, what is the minimal shippable product that we could deliver with all services? Because the VPs would not let me do a limited amount of services.
Yep.
Our mantra was it had to be all services, but it could be limited functionality for all services. And so we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have it implemented.
Yep.
So thank you for your time, and we're glad to answer questions on the side if you have any.
Yeah, we'll be right over here afterward. Thank you.
Thank you.